TSI-2 versus TSI-3B, a practical stroke recovery and self-control study part 2, number 1669, the 3rd of June 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category stroke. Fluid dynamics perspective of TSI. As I reflected further on the meaning of the TSI, I realized that the fluid dynamics interpretation may be more appropriate than the solid mechanics interpretation. Although the viscoplastic medicine theory VMT originates from engineering concepts used in both solid mechanics and fluid mechanics, stroke development behaves more like a flow problem than a deformation problem. In solid mechanics, stress gradually produces deformation, and excessive deformation eventually leads to fracture or failure. In fluid mechanics, flow conditions gradually evolve over time. Pressure, resistance, viscosity, turbulence, and flow instability interact continuously until a critical event eventually occurs. The mathematics behind the two viewpoints may be identical, but the physical interpretations are different. For stroke, the fluid dynamics interpretation appears more natural because blood continuously flows through the vascular network every second of every day. From this viewpoint, pulse pressure reflects the condition of the flow channel. It provides information regarding vessel stiffness, elasticity, and the ability of the vascular system to absorb pressure fluctuations. Systolic blood pressure represents the driving force of the flow system. As pressure rises, the mechanical load on vessel walls increases, and the probability of local failure increases. Glucose represents a long-term modifier of the flow environment. Elevated glucose gradually alters vascular structure, endothelial function, and flow resistance, making the entire system more vulnerable to future damage. Under this interpretation, the TSI is not simply a risk score, it becomes a flow stability indicator. A low TSI suggests that the vascular flow system remains within a relatively stable operating region. A high TSI suggests that the flow system is moving toward a less stable state where future failure becomes increasingly possible. The trajectory itself becomes more important than any single measurement. Just as an engineer monitors pressure, flow rate, and system stability within a pipeline network, the TSI monitors the evolving condition of the vascular flow system. This perspective also helps explain why daily monitoring is valuable. A stroke rarely appears without a preceding physiological journey. The underlying vascular system often spends months or years moving gradually toward instability before a clinical event occurs. This concept is consistent with my long-standing river and harbor analogy. In this framework, metabolic disorders represent the river itself. The river is always flowing. Regardless of whether symptoms are present, different mortality-related diseases represent different harbors along that river. Stroke is one harbor, cardiovascular disease is another harbor, chronic kidney disease is another harbor, dementia is another harbor. The river continuously moves through time, carrying the consequences of glucose metabolism, blood pressure, lifestyle habits, aging, inflammation, and vascular damage. The destination depends on the direction and stability of the flow. From this viewpoint, the TSI is measuring where the river is flowing today and whether the flow is moving toward or away from a dangerous harbor. The index is not attempting to predict the exact date of arrival. Instead, it is providing a real-time assessment of the river's current trajectory. Therefore, the TSI should not be viewed as a prediction of when a stroke will occur. Instead, it should be viewed as an indicator of where the vascular flow system currently resides along its journey. For me personally, the TSI serves as a navigation instrument rather than a prediction tool. Its purpose is not to forecast the exact timing of failure. Its purpose is to reveal whether the flow system is moving toward greater stability or greater instability. In this sense, the TSI resembles a river flow monitor more than a diagnostic test. The river is always moving. The question is whether flow remains smooth and controlled or whether it is gradually approaching conditions that increase the probability of overflow, rupture, or failure. This fluid dynamics interpretation may ultimately provide a more intuitive understanding of stroke progression because it focuses on continuous movement, trajectory, and evolving system stability rather than on a single static measurement. Although the mathematical foundation remains identical to the viscoplastic concepts used in solid mechanics, the fluid dynamics viewpoint better captures the continuous progression of disease and the ongoing journey toward or away from a dangerous harbor. Epilogue. As I was preparing to finish this paper, I calculated my final TSI-3B value for today using a complete day's worth of glucose and blood pressure measurements. The result was 94. For many readers, 94 may appear to be just another number. For me, it represents something much more important. It represents peace of mind. Over the years, I have learned that uncertainty itself can become a source of stress. A person may know that they have diabetes, hypertension, vascular disease, or a history of stroke, but they often do not know whether today's condition is better or worse than yesterday's condition. They may know the diagnosis, but they do not know the trajectory. The primary value of TSI is not prediction. Its value is guidance. Every day, I collect glucose data, blood pressure data, and pulse pressure data. These measurements are then combined into a simple index that helps answer a practical question: am I moving toward a safer zone or a more dangerous zone when today's TSI-3B value is 94? I do not interpret it as a guarantee that nothing bad will happen tomorrow. Biology does not provide guarantees. Instead, I interpret it as evidence that today's physiological condition remains within my target range and that my current control strategy is working. The true power of TSI is not the final number itself. The power comes from the continuous feedback loop behind the number. Measure gives calculate, gives interpret, gives adjust, behavior gives measure again. From an engineering perspective, this is simply a feedback control system. From a medical perspective, it becomes a practical method of self-management. As I reflected on this process, I realized that the philosophy behind TSI is surprisingly similar to the philosophy behind Newton's laws of motion. Newton's contribution was not merely an equation. His contribution was identifying the dominant variables and describing their interactions through a simple arithmetic relationship. In a similar way, the TSI framework attempts to identify a small number of dominant physiological variables and combine them into a simple and understandable indicator. This study further clarified the roles of those variables. Pulse pressure primarily reflects the condition of the vascular system. Systolic blood pressure functions as the dominant controllable vascular factor. Glucose functions as an important metabolic amplifier. Understanding these different roles helped me distinguish the signal from the noise and focus my attention on the variables that matter most. Ultimately, this paper is not about mathematics. It is not about equations, charts, or indices. It is about survival. The TSI does not tell me how long I will live. It simply helps me make better decisions today than I made yesterday. For a stroke survivor, that may be enough. One safe day becomes one safe week. One safe week becomes one safe month. One safe month becomes one safe year. And that is how survival is achieved. One day at a time. The greatest achievement of TSI so far is not prediction, it is behavior modification. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.